The Corvette you see today almost died in the 1970s, but what happened next changed American sports cars forever. Let's dive right in. Now, the very first Corvette arrived in 1953. Only 300 units were built, all finished in polo white with red interiors, powered by a modest inline-six engine they called the Blue Flame. Hardly the stuff of legend, but what made it quietly revolutionary wasn't the engine at all. It was the fiberglass body. Back then, using fiberglass for a production car was almost unheard of in the United States. Steel was the norm. Fiberglass allowed designers to shape the car in ways Detroit simply couldn't do before. And that sleek roadster look immediately caught attention at the Motorama, where the Corvette first stunned crowds as a concept. Still, sales were shaky. By 1955, the project was nearly canceled, and if one man hadn't stepped in, the Corvette story might have ended right there. That man was Zora Arkus Duntov, often called the father of the Corvette. He believed the Corvette needed one thing above all else: speed. So, in 1955, the Corvette received something that would define its entire future: a V8 engine. Suddenly, the car wasn't just stylish, it was fast. That momentum carried into what many still consider the most beautiful Corvette ever made, the 1963 Stingray. Now, this car was a massive leap forward. Independent rear suspension, a much more rigid chassis, and one of the most dramatic designs ever seen on an American car. But there's one detail many people forget. The famous split rear window on the 1963 coupe was actually controversial inside GM. Design chief Bill Mitchell loved it. Engineers hated it because it hurt rear visibility. And after just one model year, it was gone, which means the 1963 split window Corvair became one of the rarest and most collectible Corvettes ever made, almost by accident. Moving into the C3 generation in 1968, the Corvette became something completely different. Longer, wider, more aggressive, clearly inspired by the wild Mako Shark 2 concept. But this era also brought a challenge that nearly crippled performance cars across America: emissions regulations and the fuel crisis of the 1970s. Horsepower numbers that once pushed past 400 suddenly dropped dramatically. By the mid-70s, there were Corvettes that were almost embarrassingly slow for a sports car, and yet the Corvette survived. Why? Because Chevrolet understood something important. The Corvette had already become something bigger than raw numbers. It had become American sports car. That resilience carried into the C4 Corvette in 1984, which was a complete technological reboot. Digital dashboards, improved aerodynamics, and one of the most sophisticated chassis setups Detroit had built at the time. But the real monster of this generation appeared in 1990 with the Corvette ZR1. This car featured the LT5 engine, a wild dual overhead cam V8 developed with help from Lotus Cars. It produced 375 horsepower when most American sports cars were struggling to break 250, so advanced that it got nicknamed the King of the Hill. And Chevy was so proud of it that they installed a special Valley key system that could literally limit engine performance when lending the car to someone else. Pretty clever, and maybe a little paranoid. But if you agree or don't agree, either way, boop the like button. Thanks. By 1997, the C5 Corvette arrived and quietly fixed one of the biggest weaknesses of earlier Corvettes: weight distribution. Engineers moved the transmission to the rear and a transaxle layout, dramatically improving balance and handling. The C5 also introduced the legendary LS1 engine, which became the foundation for one of the most successful engine families in modern automotive history. Then came the C6 Corvette in 2005, and suddenly the Corvette was no longer just competing with American rivals, it was hunting European supercars. The C6 Z06 delivered a naturally aspirated 7-liter V8 producing over 500 horsepower, something unheard of for a production small block engine at the time. And then things got even crazier with the ZR1, which pushed output past 630 horsepower and introduced carbon fiber body panels to the Corvette lineup. Suddenly, the Corvette wasn't just fast for an American car, it was fast for any car. But just when people thought Corvette had reached its peak, the C7 Corvette arrived in 2014, bringing back the historic Stingray name and introducing sharper design, modern technology, and performance that rivaled cars twice its price. The C7 Z06 pushed performance to astonishing levels with 650 horsepower, while the later ZR1 climbed even higher. And yet, the biggest change in Corvette history was still coming, because for decades, Corvette engineers secretly dreamed of one thing: a mid-engine layout. In 2020, the C8 finally made that dream real. For the first time in 67 years, the Corvette looked and drove like a genuine supercar. Not a near supercar, not almost exotic. The real thing. Then came the C8 Z06, featuring a naturally aspirated flat plane crank V8 that screamed past 8,000 RPM, something previously unheard of for an American V8. And now the newest chapter arrives with the C8 ZR1. This version takes the already ferocious mid-engine Corvette and pushes it into territory that once belonged only to the world's most elite hypercars. Twin turbochargers, extreme aerodynamics, and power figures that rewrite the rulebook of what an American sports car can be. When you lay all of this out across 70 years, a pattern emerges. Every single generation faced a crisis. The first one had to prove America could build a sports car at all. The second had to prove it could actually handle. The third had to survive an era that was killing performance cars wholesale. The fourth had to drag the nameplate into the modern world. The fifth fixed the fundamentals. The sixth went to war with Europe. The seventh refined everything the previous six had built. The eighth threw out the rulebook entirely. That's not just a product history. That's a pretty good story about what happens when people refuse to let something die. But Corvette wasn't building this legacy alone, because while American sports car was evolving through decades of reinvention, another icon was quietly growing on the other side of the performance battlefield. One that started life in 1964 and would go on to define an entirely different kind of